We've had some challenges this year in our building services division. Our costs have pretty consistently been exceeding our revenues. So as a result of that, we've been keeping our staffing levels low. We've had to dip into our reserve funds as well. What that means is that in the spring, when we had three building techs retire, senior building techs retire, they took a lot of institutional knowledge with them, and we had a difficult time hiring to replace those positions. At the same time, we had a large surge in building activity, and so we ended up in a situation where we had a really high workload, not enough staff, and our timelines ended up very extended in processing building permits. So it was a really challenging time for us. Building services is what's called an enterprise fund. It's intended to be entirely supported by fees that we collect from people who are applying for and receiving building permits. We've seen a decrease in building activity overall in Washington County as some of our large development areas like North Bethany are finishing up. So going forward, we expect to still see a lot of development activity because we're a large jurisdiction, but it'll be really different than it has been in the past, and the numbers won't be as high as they have been at some points in the last 10 or 15 years. So with the change in the types of development that we're seeing in Washington County, what we're seeing is that while each individual application may be smaller than some of the applications we've seen in the past or the development types we've seen in the past, they can actually be more complex for our staff to process. So our fees haven't kept up with the workload that it's actually taking to process these, and our fees haven't kept up with the increase in costs for staff. And that's a combination of salaries needing to increase with cost of living adjustments, as well as with other costs such as health insurance benefits keeping up. And so we've ended up in just a bit of a lopsided situation where our fees haven't really kept track with the costs that we incur and that we need to in order to provide these services to the community. We're taking these financial and staffing challenges and turning them into opportunities. So the opportunities that we've seen coming out of this are really a time to evaluate our staffing levels and the processes that we have in place here at Washington County and looking for ways to identify efficiencies. And so we were able to, through the spring and the summer and early fall, implement a number of process changes that have resulted in efficiencies. We were able to reassign staff duties to make sure that we're right-sizing our staff for the workload that needs to be done. And we were able to bring in 3 new staff who jumped in feet first and were trained very quickly and are now able to take on a higher level of workload. And so through those process efficiencies and bringing in these new staff, we were able to resolve the specific delays with our permitting processes. One of the steps that we took in order to resolve the significant backlog of building permits was to close our lobby for in-person customer service on Wednesdays. That resulted in staff being able to spend more time working on the backlog and working on permits that were being received electronically at that time. We are intending to reopen the lobby on Wednesdays in January as we've resolved the backlog issues. We have a really hard-working team of great staff in our building services division, and they work hard every day to deliver a great service to our community. So it's really a pleasure to work with them. So in order to fill our 3 staff vacancies, we worked closely with LUT's administrative department as well as with our county's human resources department, and we're able to hire 3 outstanding staff to fill those vacancies. The result of all of these process changes and bringing our new staff on board is that we are now meeting our target timelines of turning around our building permits intake and final file check in under a week. Moving forward, we've identified a number of process improvements that we've already made. We've also identified some that we can evaluate and look at implementing going into the future. We're also continuing to look at the right size for our staffing model and how we can make sure that we have the right people working on the right tasks to really be as efficient as possible going forward. The challenges are definitely still there, in particular the imbalance between our fees and our actual staff costs, but we're feeling really optimistic that our process improvements and our evaluation of our fees going forward will be successful and help us maintain the flexibility that we need to be successful moving into the future.